I cheated on you. Those 4 words hung in the air between us, like a sentence handed down by a judge. My world froze, and I stared at him, feeling like the ground had just crumbled beneath me. How could he? How could we have come to this? You, what? I whispered, my voice shaking with disbelief. I could barely breathe, let alone comprehend what he was telling me. Mark looked at me, his eyes hollow, his face gaunt from the stress and weight loss that had plagued him ever since his diagnosis. He wasn't the man I had fallen in love with 8 years ago. He looked broken, and for the first time, I realized that I was partly responsible for that. I'm sorry, Barbara, he said, his voice cracking. I was in a dark place. I didn't feel wanted, and I let someone else make me feel important. It was a mistake, a horrible mistake. I took a step back, as if putting distance between us would make the truth less painful. How could you do this to us? After everything, after all we've been through? My voice wavered, barely able to contain the hurt and anger surging inside me. I don't know, he admitted, his hands shaking as he ran them through his thinning hair. I've asked myself that question 1,000 times, and I don't have a good answer. I was lonely, and you seemed so distant. I didn't know how to reach you. Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. You didn't know how to reach me, so you reached out to someone else? How is that supposed to make me feel? He sighed deeply, a sound full of regret and sorrow. I know it doesn't make sense, and it doesn't excuse what I did. I hate myself for it, Barbara. I wish I could take it back, but I can't. I stood there, numb, struggling to process the betrayal. It wasn't just the infidelity that cut so deep, it was the realization that we had both let things get to this point. I had been distant, I had pushed him away, and in my attempt to protect myself, I had lost him. Was it because of the cancer? I asked, my voice small. Was it because you thought I didn't care? His eyes filled with tears as he shook his head. No, well, maybe partly. I didn't know how to deal with the diagnosis. I felt like my life was slipping away, and you were slipping away too. I didn't know how to talk to you about it. I was scared, and I made the worst decision of my life. I turned away from him, trying to hold myself together. I thought about the last year, the fights, the coldness between us, the way I had rejected his attempts at intimacy. I had been so focused on my own fears, my own insecurities, that I hadn't seen how much he was hurting. I never wanted to lose you, I whispered, more to myself than to him. But I pushed you away, didn't I? He didn't answer right away, and when he did, his voice was filled with guilt. We both did. But that doesn't excuse what I did. I betrayed your trust, and I don't know if you can ever forgive me for that. I turned back to him, my heart aching with a mix of anger and sorrow. I don't know either. But I do know that I love you, Mark. I always have. And despite everything, despite this, I don't want to lose you. He looked at me with such sadness that it broke my heart all over again. I love you too, Barbara. But I need time. Time to heal, time to figure out who I am again. I don't want to hurt you anymore. I nodded, understanding but also terrified. And what about us? What happens to us? He sighed, reaching out to take my hand. We take it one day at a time. I want to make this right, but I need to be in a better place first. Can you wait for me? I looked into his eyes, searching for the man I had loved for so long. Despite everything, I still saw him there, buried beneath the pain and guilt. I'll wait, I said softly. But please, don't shut me out anymore. He nodded, squeezing my hand. I won't. I promise. The days after Mark's confession were some of the longest of my life. The weight of what he had done, and what we had both allowed to happen, hung over me like a cloud that I couldn't escape. I wanted to scream, to cry, to lash out at him for betraying me, but all I could do was sit in the suffocating silence of our home, replaying the past year in my mind. I remembered the nights I had turned away from him in bed, too caught up in my own fears to reach out to him. I remembered the coldness in my voice during our arguments, the way I had thrown the idea of breaking up at him like a weapon, hoping it would make him see how much I needed him. I had been selfish, using the threat of leaving as a way to get his attention, not realizing that it was pushing him further away. I spent hours thinking about the woman he had turned to, imagining their conversations, the intimacy they had shared. It made me sick to my stomach, the thought of someone else being there for him when I wasn't. I wanted to hate her, but I couldn't. This wasn't her fault, it was ours. Mark tried to be there for me, but I could see the strain it was putting on him. He was dealing with so much, the cancer, the guilt, the shame, and I knew that asking him to be strong for both of us was unfair. But I couldn't help it. I needed him, needed to know that he still loved me, still wanted to make this work. One evening, after another long day of trying to pretend that everything was okay, I finally broke down. We were sitting at the dinner table, the food on our plates untouched, when I looked at him and saw the same haunted expression that had been there ever since his confession. "I don't know how to do this," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I don't know how to move past this, Mark. It hurts so much." He looked at me with those tired, sorrowful eyes and nodded slowly. "I know, Barbara. I'm so sorry. I wish I could take away your pain, but I don't know how." I felt the tears welling up in my eyes, and I quickly wiped them away, hating how vulnerable I felt. "I keep thinking about her, about you with her. I know it wasn't anything serious, but it doesn't make it hurt any less." Mark's face crumpled, and he reached across the table to take my hand. "I never meant to hurt you. I was so lost, and I let my emotions get the better of me. I hate myself for what I did, and I hate that I'm the reason you're in pain." I looked down at our hands, his fingers intertwined with mine. "I just don't understand why, Mark. Why wasn't I enough? Why couldn't you come to me instead of going to someone else?" He shook his head, his voice heavy with regret. "It wasn't about you not being enough. You've always been more than enough for me. But I felt so disconnected from you, like there was this wall between us, and I didn't know how to break through it. When I got the diagnosis, I felt even more lost. I didn't want to burden you with it, and I didn't know how to ask for your help. I thought I had to be strong, but in trying to be strong, I pushed you away." I swallowed hard, feeling the familiar ache in my chest. "And that's why you turned to someone else? Because I made you feel like you couldn't come to me?" Mark sighed deeply, his eyes filled with tears. "Maybe. I don't know. I just know that I was in a dark place, and she was there at the wrong time. It was a mistake, one that I'll regret for the rest of my life. But it doesn't change how I feel about you, Barbara. I still love you, more than anything." I felt the tears spill over, and I quickly wiped them away, trying to stay strong. "I want to believe that, Mark. I want to believe that we can get through this. But it's so hard. I keep thinking that if I had just been there for you, if I had been a better partner, maybe this wouldn't have happened." Mark squeezed my hand, his voice filled with pain. "This isn't your fault, Barbara. I made the choice to cheat, and I take full responsibility for that. But I also know that we both contributed to the distance between us. We both need to work on this, if we want to have a chance at rebuilding what we've lost." I nodded, knowing he was right, but still struggling to accept it. "I'm willing to try, Mark. I want to make this work, but I don't know how to move past the hurt. I don't know how to trust you again." He looked at me, his eyes filled with sadness. "I'll do whatever it takes, Barbara. I'll go to therapy, I'll talk to you, I'll be there for you in any way I can. I just need you to give me a chance to make this right." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. I knew that if we were going to have any chance at rebuilding our relationship, I would have to be willing to forgive him. But forgiveness wasn't something that came easily, especially when the wounds were still so fresh. "I want to try, Mark," I said softly. "But I need time. I need to work through my own feelings before I can truly forgive you." He nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here, waiting for you, ready to make things right." And so, we began the long, painful process of healing. It wasn't easy. There were days when I felt like the hurt was too much to bear, when I questioned whether we could ever truly move past what had happened. But there were also moments of hope, moments when I saw glimpses of the love we had once shared. We started going to therapy together, and for the first time, we really talked about the issues that had been festering beneath the surface for so long. I opened up about my fears, about the reasons why I had pushed him away, and he listened, really listened, in a way that he hadn't before. He talked about his own struggles, about the guilt and shame he felt for what he had done, and we began to understand each other in a way that we hadn't in years. There were still moments of doubt, moments when I wondered if we were only delaying the inevitable. But I knew that I wasn't ready to give up on us, not yet. We had been through so much together, and I still believed that we could find our way back to each other. It was a slow, painful process. Forgiveness doesn't come easily when the wounds are so fresh, but day by day, we began to rebuild. It wasn't just about mending what was broken, it was about creating something new, something stronger than what we had before. Our therapist, Dr. Mitchell, was a quiet, thoughtful woman who had a way of cutting through the noise and getting to the heart of the matter. In one of our sessions, she asked us both to talk about the most painful moment in our relationship, and for the first time, I saw Mark cry openly, his tears a reflection of the deep sorrow he carried. It wasn't just the cheating, I confessed, my voice trembling as I spoke. It was the realization that I had been pushing you away for so long, and I didn't even realize it. I kept testing you, expecting you to prove that you loved me, but I never gave you the chance to really show it. Mark looked at me, his eyes red and filled with regret. And I kept failing those tests. I should have fought harder to break down that wall between us, but I didn't know how. I felt like I was losing you, and I panicked. I turned to someone else because I was too afraid to face what was happening between us. Dr. Mitchell nodded, her gaze moving between us. It sounds like you both were carrying a lot of unspoken fears and insecurities. But now you're here, talking about it, which is a huge step. Healing won't happen overnight, but it's clear that you both still care deeply for each other. I wiped away a tear, feeling the weight of her words. I do care, Mark. I care so much that it scares me. I just don't know how to move forward without feeling like I'm always looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next time you'll hurt me. Mark reached out to take my hand, his touch gentle. I understand, Barbara. And I know I've broken your trust in a way that's going to take time to repair. But I'm committed to doing whatever it takes to make this work. I'm committed to us. His words hung in the air, and I felt the knot in my chest loosen just a bit. There was still so much pain, so much uncertainty, but there was also a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. We began spending more time together, doing the things we used to enjoy before everything fell apart. We went on long walks, exploring the trails near our home, talking about everything and nothing. We cooked dinner together, the simple act of preparing a meal side by side bringing a sense of normalcy back into our lives. And slowly, we began to reconnect. But there were still difficult days, days when the pain and doubt would resurface, threatening to pull us back into the darkness. I would find myself thinking about the other woman, about the way Mark had turned to her when he should have turned to me, and it would feel like a fresh wound reopening. One evening, after one of those particularly difficult days, Mark found me sitting alone on the porch, staring out at the darkening sky. He sat down beside me, his presence a comforting warmth in the cool night air. I've been thinking, he said softly, his voice breaking the silence. About everything we've been through, everything I've put you through. And I want you to know that I'm not going to give up on us, Barbara. No matter how hard it gets, I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. I looked at him, my heart aching with a mixture of love and pain. I don't want you to go anywhere, Mark. But I'm still scared. I'm scared that no matter how hard we try, this will always be between us. He nodded, his expression serious. I know. And I can't promise that it will ever fully go away. But I can promise that I'll do everything in my power to make sure it never happens again. I've learned from my mistakes, and I'm not going to let fear drive me to hurt you again. His words were sincere, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. Maybe we couldn't erase the past, but we could learn from it. We could build something new, something stronger, from the pieces of what had been broken. We continued to work on our relationship, slowly rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. It wasn't easy, there were setbacks, moments of doubt and fear, but we faced them together. Mark's health continued to be a challenge, and there were days when the weight of his illness felt like too much to bear. But through it all, we supported each other, finding strength in our love. One day, as we were sitting together on the couch, watching a movie, I looked over at Mark and saw him smiling, really smiling, for the first time in what felt like ages. It was a simple moment, but it was one that filled me with hope. "I missed this," I said, reaching out to take his hand. "I missed us." He squeezed my hand, his eyes filled with warmth. "I missed us too, Barbara. And I'm so grateful that we're finding our way back." As I sat there, holding his hand, I realized that we had come a long way. We had been through so much pain, so much heartache, but we had also learned and grown from it. We had faced our fears, our insecurities, and we had chosen to fight for each other. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what the future held, we would face it together, hand in hand, with the strength of the love that had brought us this far. We weren't perfect, far from it, but we were committed to each other, to the life we had built, and to the future we were creating. It wasn't always going to be easy, but it was going to be worth it. Because in the end, love isn't about never making mistakes, it's about learning from them, growing from them, and choosing to stay together, no matter how hard it gets. And I was ready to keep choosing Mark every day, for the rest of my life.